Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Command Q, the podcast for quitters. We're your hosts. I'm John Pelfrey.
And I'm Maari Casey.
And today we're excited to bring you another inspiring quitting story, all about giving up the grind and cutting your own path through life. Let's welcome Mike Ferrell. When you were working sort of corporate life before you started your own thing, did you feel like they were making the best use of your talents and your skills while you were there?
So I was at Lenovo for over a decade. Mm-hmm. And I worked in sales, then I went to brand, and then I went to worldwide product communications, and then I went to North American marketing. And so during that time, I was able to work these different roles and learn from previous jobs that I held in the company, but then also expand. And so I was constantly trying to challenge myself and try new things. I also would participate and start other things at the company and find other ways to utilize like the creative aspects. I missed that part at Lenovo, which is why I went back to school, because I knew I wanted to do more storytelling and I knew it wasn't it. So I started that pivot slowly and realized it as I was going back to school, knowing that I wanted to do something else. So Lenovo was super helpful to me. They enabled me to do what I wanted and how I wanted to work. They were super supportive of all the crazy things I wanted to try and that type of thing.
Wow. That's a rare situation, I think.
They supported me. I partnered with a nonprofit organization called Rally for Rangers, where we deliver motorcycles to park rangers and parks across the world. It was my first time doing it, meeting with some executives and telling them you have to raise a significant amount of money to do this thing. It buys a motorcycle and then you get to drive that motorcycle across the country and deliver it to a park ranger. And they just thought it was great. And I was like, it could be a cool story. So they paid for me to do that. And it was probably over $10,000. And I went to Mongolia and drove across Mongolia and back. Then they donated like 10 computers to this school for kids that want to be like future park rangers and all that type of thing. So they were great during my time there. I'm grateful for that experience for sure.
I think you offer a unique perspective because so many times when we talk to people who have gone from corporate into self-employment and built a business, a lot of times they can come out of a situation with a job that's not pleasant. And so sometimes it's either they're let go, they want to leave, or it's this toxic situation. And I think it's nice because it happens a lot of times. It's just time to move on, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think what I've noticed too is sometimes we have a tendency to make our full-time job like the evil stepmother, right? It's like toxic and bad, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just no. It was great, and it served me at that point in my career until I no longer needed to be there, and then I could step out. So I think it's cool that you have that opportunity to really grow and build, and they gain from you, and you gain from them as well.
I lost my job there, and it forced me to freelance. I went back to school to UNC, their School of Media and Journalism, knowing that I wanted to get in that direction, not exactly what, but I don't know if I could like easily just walked away from that great salary, benefits, and that comfort. Who knows if I could have done that or if I would just slowly wean myself off. So that like me losing my job forced me into the position to go, maybe this didn't happen to me, it happened for me. So I went towards that direction. But then things started happening in a positive way. I took those as signs that I was going in the right direction.
Did you ever consider alternatives outside of self-employment or going back to school? Did you think about like just getting another job somewhere?
Yeah, hell yeah. I was scared because when you lose your job, your immediate response is, I'm screwed. How am I going to survive? Which is totally natural and understandable. I was applying to jobs and that type of thing and went on interviews and stuff. And it just didn't feel good. I also didn't get a job offer. But like during that process, I was on a long road trip to Memphis for this barbecue competition. I was listening to a podcast, Shelby Stanger's Wild Ideas Worth Living. It's about taking chances and going for things. I had this podcast idea like 3 years prior, and I didn't know how to do it. So I bought all the gear and it just sat in the closet. But after listening to that, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do the podcast. And so that gave me something like a creative outlet or something to focus on, where I felt like I was making steps towards something. So I did a podcast and I got to chat with people who were pursuing their creative pursuits or living like on the periphery and doing their own things, like chefs and comedians and other creative folks. That work and those conversations inspired me to pursue my own thing. And that's why I continued going. And then a friend of mine reached out about helping produce a short documentary. I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. And that snowballed into starting a production company.
So do you feel like you starting the podcast was the impetus for that next move and step forward?
I think so. Yeah. I think going back to school really opened my eyes to opportunities and different ways of storytelling. And I think probably gave me a bit more confidence to pursue that type of work. And then a friend reaching out and asking about working on a short doc, and then just being involved in that gave me the confidence and the know-how to at least go in that direction.
I think it's interesting too. Maybe you did this unknowingly, but I think this is a successful thing that I see a lot of people who make that transition from corporate into full-time self-employment when you're jumped into the void and have no sense of control and you're used to getting work as opposed to creating it a lot of times. There's that feeling of just floating. And I think one piece of advice that we give people is find one thing that you can control that you can do. So if you're a copywriter, it's like produce a blog once a week, once a month, that you're just doing it. And it's something that you can control and you're putting it out there. And it helps you to get that sense of stability because now you're creating something. And all of a sudden when someone lashes onto it and you get your first job, you realize that it starts to become aware that I can create my own work. Yeah. And that's a huge leap because then you realize you have the power to create your own work, which means you have the power to create your own money. Doing that podcast is probably that little domino push for you that kind of pushed you in that direction.
Yeah. And then having people reach out and say that they listen and that they enjoy it and that they get a lot from it. Just like, all right, this is cool. And just, I think you're right. The process of creation and more so being in that position, I don't know exactly where it's going to lead to, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is to create and then see where that takes you.
Yeah. One of my favorite books is a book by Jeff Tweedy, the lead singer of Wilco. He wrote a book called How to Write One Song. The idea is you don't set out as a musician to write 1,000 songs. You just get up every day and write one song. And then you get up the next day and write another song and then another song. It's 180 pages of that, basically. Great book, though.
That's
and it's
awesome.
really good for creatives. He puts it in such a simple way and it's an easy listen or an easy read. Yeah.
Yeah. Thinking about my own journey, applying that to freelancers in general is just like, it seems really daunting. Or even getting into a field that you feel like, man, this is a really hard field to succeed in. I think, yeah, it's little things and just learning and connecting and with other people and being open to the ebbs and flows. For me, I think that is more of a learned skills. I've always been able to go with things, but when it comes to money and financials and work and things, I think it's easier for me to maybe do that than other folks. But I think being able to lean into the ebbs and flows and trust in the why of like why I want to do this work and lean in on that and just trust that it's going to work out and do the work necessary to get you there.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your first year in business as a formal business. What was that like for you? What were some of the difficulties and some of the successes that you had?
Super exciting. I co-founded a production company called Top Studio in March 2020. So right when the pandemic kicked off. And, and we got lucky and got some gigs pretty quickly that carried us through and launched us into the following year. It was exciting because I also wasn't by myself. Even though I was a freelancer, so to speak, I wasn't by myself. and just did that work over the past 4 years. And it was amazing. I learned so much along the way. I think now it's easier to talk to that because I made the decision to step away from that company a few months ago to pursue work and projects, I think, that more aligned with why I want to do, like why I'm in this field. And so now I think the journey, it's almost like I'm starting over because now I'm by myself building this thing as an independent producer and writer and creative director. So it's different now. My partner, she's also a filmmaker and she's also an independent director and editor. And so we work together on some things. We also work independently. So we understand what each other are going through and can give each other pep talks and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think that's helpful. It's a crazy experience. Even though I was working with other people in the other company, there is still this fight the whole time of getting work and trying to build a successful company. And that doesn't change working with people or by yourself. You just have to put in the work. And I think having that North Star while you're doing it helps you through those moments where you're like, what the hell am I even doing? Result, what still happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the middle of that, one of the things that stuck out to me was you said you were leaving your previous company to start your own thing because you wanted to pursue things that got you excited. So what are those things? What's the thing that gets you excited to get up in the morning and do that maybe caused you to make that shift?
I think it's wanting to tell stories that connect. Premium nonfiction, branded entertainment, it's all kind of documentary style. Or I think having the freedom to move towards those types of projects, whether they're connecting communities, telling powerful stories, people doing work like farm stories, climate and gender stories. It's not a specific lane, but about the power of the people in the story and working with them on telling their story, being empowered to do that work and do it the best way I know how and having the freedom to do that. So that's why I made the decision.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is a question I've always had about documentary filmmakers and I've never really understood. If you want to make a documentary on farmers, who pays for that? Where does that come from? Are you running all of that on?
Hell no.
Is it grants? Is it because it's difficult? You got to pay your own bills, whatever. And I've always just wondered, who are these magical people that get to make these amazing stories? How does this work?
Yeah, let me know. I think it's a total combination. Oftentimes, brands are the ones in position to say, hey, we would like to tell this story. I've worked with a lot of outdoor brands and athletes, and we would help them tell their stories. And so that's that natural segue into the brand storytelling because it's this mission about this athlete doing something powerful. But where I like to work is, all right, this is cool, but what's the common connector that people can relate to? Not everyone's going to climb Everest or whatever it may be. What's the human thing that connects this story to others? So that's what I tried to do in the work. And then finding brands that align with the values of those stories, whether they're current relationships that I have or building new ones and explaining the story and see if that's something that works. There's film grants that you submit to or people aligned with making impact in storytelling. There's no blueprint into how it's done. Every film is cobbled together in some form or fashion. The hardest part about the job is getting projects funded. It's getting harder and harder, but you continue to work because you believe in the stories and the power of those stories.
That's awesome. I think it's interesting, and this is something good to bring up because we work a lot with creatives. That's our main focus is creative professionals. And obviously you're creative and you have a heart for the work that you do. It's tough when people are creative and they care about the work in an emotional, visceral way. But then they also have to pair that with the business mind who's thinking about the P&L sheet and the costs and the expenses and the vendors and the taxes and all of that other stuff. And it's really these two sides of the brain that have to come together. And John and I talk a lot about art education and where it's falling short from teaching creatives how to think about the business side of art. We need to make money as creatives, put art into the world. I'd love for you to talk about how you have been able to align both sides of those to be able to run a business, transition to another business, and make them kind of work together, because that is an important thing that people who want to pursue art as a profession, whether or not they're staying in corporate or they're going to do freelance or self-employment, need to grapple with and be okay with, because it's super important.
Yeah, it's super important. I think that's what I love about being a producer, because I like the business aspect of the work and I love the creative aspect of it too. You can't just live in the creative if you're trying to make a business of it. I come from the business world. I was responsible for a large budget at Lenovo and would be responsible for executing and managing and working with teams. And so I think, and understanding how to communicate with executives and that type of thing. So it comes more naturally to me because of the experience that I had prior to getting to this. So I think just that experience has allowed me to wear both hats successfully. Mm-hmm. And it's really important. I think partnering with a producer that does understand those aspects, because there's a lot of freelance producers out there that do understand how to balance a budget, the impacts of all these different things. Mm-hmm. To partner with them and then learn from us or whatever it may be over time. If they're interested in learning that aspect of it through osmosis, I think it happens. It's just like talking through it and learning and being inquisitive. There's so much information out there available.
It seems like you've developed a skill to be able to sell these ideas to companies, to brands, to other people, to get buy-in. Even the story that you told us at the beginning, sitting down with executives at Lenovo to sell them on this idea of funding this motorcycle and then filming it. That strikes me as something not a lot of people who work in a big corporation would even have the wherewithal to think of, much less have the guts to pitch and get somebody to fund it.
Thank you. My experience, like when I was a brand manager, I used to travel across the country for Lenovo and sit in like these rooms and take these like executives through our product portfolio and answer questions and have to do that. And I think that's helped me. Also, I think when you believe in something that like you truly believe in what you're doing and there's more to it than just making money, that comes across to people when you have the opportunity to get in front of them and share with them what it is, why you're excited and why they should be too.
I think the authenticity is so key. And it's interesting because hearing you talk about your experience, in corporate and self-employment, it's like all those little things you pick up in a corporate environment. A lot of people shoot that down. They're like, I'm going to go straight into freelance. But I always say, don't negate the fact that those experiences in a corporate environment are actually really helpful when you're building your own business. Either you're going to use them to pitch business or to go after things, or you're going to realize, I don't want that in my business because it didn't work for me here. And then you take that to your business and build something better.
Yeah, exactly. And then even like running my own business, I didn't do everything perfect. I made a lot of mistakes, but the thing is learning from them and knowing what you want to take with you when you leave and what you want to leave behind. Being clear about those things, I think, is critical.
Mm-hmm. On your road to building your first business and now on the second one, there's a lot of highs. One of my friends told me once, when you own your own business, the highs are higher and the lows are lower. You feel it. When somebody's writing your paycheck, you can keep an even keel in some ways, but the highs get really high when you land that new job. Talk to us. Were there any points where you just thought, this is really hard? How am I going to make payroll or pay these people that I owe? How do you get through that and see the other side and go, hey, this is really why I'm doing this. And I'm going to keep pushing forward, even though at this moment it's tough.
I think there are a lot of different moments where you pause and think about what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. I think the low moments for me, I try to just let them process and sit and not be reactionary to those low moments. maybe I'll go out for a run, or I'll try to do some type of breathing or go outside and get myself out of that mindset. It's easy to like keep digging once you get into that space. At least give myself that opportunity to like recover from that. The other thing I think that is easy to do, at least in filmmaking, is you talk about the highs of the highs. It's scary to ride those highs because you don't want to get yourself excited about something that could eventually just go away. You know what I mean? And so like you prevent yourself from feeling fully the joy of these micro moments. Okay. I've written this thing to myself about enjoy the micro moments and feel that and don't push that away. So just like, celebrate these little moments and then continue going. And I think maybe that's the way, is like looking at, instead of looking at it as a whole, but looking at these little, that whether they're negative or positive, but thinking them as micro moments to feel and move past.
I like that as a way to handle it and see it as micro moments instead of it's all this or it's all that. It's a very healthy way to manage your stress there, Mike.
Yeah, good job, Mike. People always think when they start their own job, they're like, it's going to be all sunshine and roses because it's me and it's going to be perfect. You forget it's still life and still outward influences. I try to remind people, you can have a shitty day as a freelancer just as much as you can have a hard day at a corporate office. It's good to always remember that's just part of it, right? It's like good and bad on both sides.
Yeah, I say this now, feeling great, but there's other moments where you really have to work hard to remember those things.
You were talking about what it sounded like was perseverance, remembering that a lot of people would quit right now. And I'm going to choose not to quit. At every step in a milestone, the perseverance is the thing that really separates you from success or failure. That was one of the things that I got out of that too, which is a really wonderful and profound way to look at it as other people would quit here. And if I just keep going, it's one step closer to what I want to build and what I want to do, or the next film that I want to make, or whatever that might be. What are some things that you learned or experienced while building your business that you didn't expect? The surprises, good or bad, that you were like, oh,
Interesting.
How close you actually are to the thing. When you first start off, it feels like a massive hill. When you look at other people being successful and making a living out of it, you look to those people and you're like, man, they're doing it, but it feels so far away. After trying and working in this industry, you realize actually we're really close. And actually the other people that are in this industry, they're going through the same exact thing. Everyone has similar challenges and going through it. And so I think maybe that's it, where you're not as far away from the thing as you think you are. You just need to go in that direction and keep going.
Yeah. And you mentioned your partner is also a filmmaker. What has it been like to build a community of other like-minded people? Has that been difficult for you, or was it a natural evolution that you already knew some people? But I know having a support system as a freelancer or a small business is really important.
Yeah.
How did you build that network?
My partner and I, we met working on a project together and were friends, and then started dating. And she's a super talented director, editor, and producer. We say all the time, like, how grateful we are to have each other to be able to kind of riff ideas off of and support each other in those moments where we need each other, when you just need someone to listen and understand what it is you're going through. In regard to the creative community aspect of it and building that, I think it's from going to events, participating in organizations, building other film teams and reaching out, or other people will reach out to me, or I'll reach out to them and say, hey, I admire your work. And I think it's approaching these things in a genuine way that you're trying to connect, and just harnessing that over time, just like you do with a brand. It's genuine that you're trying to connect and build. And I think that comes through from a community aspect. I'm trying to do that more now that I'm like really focused in building in the Triangle area. A lot of my work prior was in the Mountain West. So now I'm excited to really build locally with folks and try to make cool work that we're all proud of. And I think keeping that at the forefront.
Cool.
Yeah. Having that creative community, so important. It's also a way that you get connections to other freelancers with other skills, or potentially to other clients. People need your skills. Let's say they've hired a videographer and they need a producer, and they pick up the phone and call you because they know that you're capable of doing that.
Yeah. Especially with filmmaking, you have to have a team to do it. It is 100% a team sport. There's no way in hell I could make anything on my own. I love that process of creating with other folks and building teams or whatever it may be. Yeah.
Yep. And the community also gives you a clear understanding of what's happening. So how's the market, how our job is performing? Because I think a lot of times we've seen this in the last couple of years with just the wonkiness of post-COVID business. When things start to quiet down, a lot of times people have a tendency to pull back and be like, it must be me. Is it me? What's happening? Why are my jobs slowing down? And I think when you're connected to a community, and we at Uncompany are, and so we try to share this information. If you hear from somebody else in your line of business, yeah, it's also been slow for me, or the sales cycle has been like stretched out crazy, or I'm not hearing back to my typical client work, then you can relax a little bit and know it's not you, it's just a slump. It's that seasonality of business that we all experience. We always try to encourage people, you got to talk to people and know what's happening when you're starting out. Never compare yourself on day one to the person who's 10 years in business, because it's not an equal comparison. You'll get there, but give yourself some space. And the way you'll get there is by being a part of a community that has people who are at day one and who are also at day 500. That gives you that clear transparency. Okay, I will get there. I'm just right here right now.
100%. Okay. And it's easy to look at other production companies or other people and think, oh man, they have it all figured out. Because on social media, everything's presented as perfect. But I think keeping in mind that it's like a lot of work went into that and it wasn't perfect. And everyone is working hard. Not doing the comparison game is important, because it's easy to get mired down into the, oh man, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not where I should be right now. So I think just understanding that you're at where you're at for a reason and continuing on.
Been a good chat. Normally the way that we finish this is we have a little lightning round. The lightning round is just some quicker questions. First thing that comes to your mind. The first one is, now that you've been working on your own independently for a while, do you wish that you had started working for yourself sooner in your career, or do you feel like you timed it just right with the right amount of experience?
I feel like I timed it with where I was at with my experience, because I don't think I could be doing what I'm doing now without my prior experience.
Is there anything that you would say you shouldn't try to do on your own when you start a business? Maybe something that you did on your own and you were like, man, that was too big.
Accounting.
Yeah, that was no fun.
No.
The people who do accounting are special people, and you should let them do it.
Yeah.
That's one of the lists of people I always say, get your professionals in order. It's get yourself a good CPA, get yourself a really good legal advisor. Those are people you want in your corner, and they will pay for themselves by not having to be stressed out and not having to get audited. So 100%.
Correctamundo. Both of those can confirm.
What's the craziest place you've ever worked? What's the wildest place you've ever shot a video or you've ever worked?
So I went to Mongolia for the first time in 2018 as a volunteer. I was then hired as a producer to produce some video content for them in 2022. And I went back to Mongolia and got COVID in the Gobi Desert.
Wow.
And then I woke up in a tent and I was like, something is not right. And then they hired a stranger at a gas station to drive me 16 hours back to Ulaanbaatar with a rough case of COVID with the window down, and it was all off-road. That was probably the most wild experience, I thought.
Wow. That's a tough one to top.
That's it for the game, like Two Truths and a Lie. You're like, that one. And you're like, actually, no, true.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks for sharing your story with us. We've enjoyed this conversation. Before we hop off here, if people want to learn more about you and what you're doing in your projects right now, can you tell us where we can find you?
Yeah. Go to ferrellcreative.com and shoot me an email, mike@ferrellcreative.com, or you can catch me on Instagram at mike.ferrell. Ferrell is spelled F-E-R-A-L.
Got it. Like a feral animal.
That's right.
Yeah.
Undomesticated.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for your time today. We've had a great time chatting, and we hope to catch up with you soon.
Thank you all very much.
Mike.
It's been awesome chatting. Really appreciate you.
Awesome.
Later.
Okay. So we've had a little bit of time to digest our conversation with Mike. It's been a few days now, and I think Mike's story is just so inspiring because he really is not afraid to take a chance. He's not afraid to make a change. Even when he loses his job, he looks at that as an opportunity.
Yeah. I love having these freelance quitting stories because people that like huge businesses can be started from one person. Yeah. The thing that I took away for what I would start quitting is thinking that you can't start something new. We see this a lot with freelancers and people who are starting out and young people that there's this fear sometimes that you can't start over. Mike embodies that bravery. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how long you've been in a certain pathway or a certain career. You're never too late to start something new. Mike left Lenovo, went back to school, started another business, and now has grown that business and has left that business and starting something totally new. I thought that was really cool that he has done that.
Yeah. The thing I'm going to quit doing is being afraid to think big. I think his story, the initial story of, I have this idea to support an organization that I believe in, and I'm going to go to my bosses at a big company and I'm going to say, hey, can you give me $10,000, buy a motorcycle, fund a trip where I ride across Mongolia, film it, and then we'll put the branding on it and all of that. What a gutsy move to make. And such a cool thing to think. There's no harm in asking. The worst they can do is say no. Taking that one risk set the rest of his career in motion in some ways. The things that he learned, what he's excited about. He learned that he enjoys telling these types of stories. But it just came from that initial idea of, I believe in the cause that I'm trying to support, and I'm going to think big about how I can do that. So I'm going to quit thinking small, start not being afraid to think big.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. My takeaway from it is in line with that story. I try to instill this in my kids. Don't be afraid to ask. To meet somebody, ask if you could have coffee. If you want to try something, ask if they can do it. And Mike clearly has that. He's not afraid to ask. He's not afraid of no. And I think that when he asked, hey, can we drive a motorcycle across Mongolia? Like, all I could have said was like, no. And he's like, okay. But if he didn't ask, he would have never been given the yes to have that experience. So I thought the takeaway was like, it's okay to ask for something. I thought that was a really cool idea because it's so valuable and it can really change so many things in your life and in your business.
Yeah. And so often we're just afraid to ask the question. You can go back to elementary school and feeling like, I'm afraid to raise my hand and ask the question because people are going to think I'm dumb. And sometimes we let those types of insecurities carry on with us throughout our lives. And Mike just seems to go, I'm going to ask the question.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to live. So my takeaway here is he mentioned when he was starting over and he was looking at, what can I do here? I've lost my job. What am I going to do? He said, find one thing that you can control and that you can do, and then go do it. I thought that was a really powerful message in resilience. You just take the first step. You don't take all of the steps all at once. You take one step, make some progress, you get some feedback from people, and then you take another step.
Yes. I know that the enormity of things could also stop people from doing anything. It's, oh my gosh, but what if this happens and this happens? I had this written on a Post-it note above my desk. It says, control the controllables. I think this is part of playing sports. We always tell the kids, like, you can't control the weather. You can't control what the other team is doing. You can't control what the refs are saying. You can only control what you're doing and how you're showing up for it. And I think that idea is such a huge measure of how successful you can be because there's just so many things that we cannot control. And if you focus on the things you can't control, then you're not going to move forward.
Absolutely. Classic coach speak right there. Love that one myself on the tennis court when I'm teaching people. today it's very windy outside. And the first thing that would happen with a tennis player in a match today is, oh, it's so windy. And you can't control that. And you also have to understand that other people are dealing with those issues as well.
Windy for them too.
It's cold outside, whatever it might be. You got to control what you can control, whether that's on the athletic field, in your personal life, or in your business. It is a really great way to keep a clear head, I think. That's about all we've got this week. It was a really interesting, fun story. I think Mike is a really cool guy. And if you're looking for somebody to help with an exciting video project where you're interested in telling a story with some depth, Mike would be a guy to talk to.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your story. We're looking forward to seeing all the cool projects you have in the future. We'll be back in a few weeks with another episode. Until then, I'm John.
And I'm Maari.
And we're reminding you that winners can quit and quitters can win. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not necessarily represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Command Q or Uncompany.